Hi and welcome to this week's mailbox, and it might be a little bit shorter than usual. When I looked back, apart from the fact there weren't that many comments relating to general World of Warcraft, which is what I talk about here, it might have something to do with the fact when I looked back I thought to myself, yeah, I haven't actually brought out a World of Warcraft video in this last week, or not a general one at any rate, until today. So yeah, most of the questions are going to be on things like the Warcraft movie props and Warcraft, especially World of Warcraft storytelling. So first things first, the Where's the Mailbox from last week was indeed, as one person noted, in Ashtranar in Ashenvale. So that's quite correct. We don't worry too much about spelling as long as it's obvious. So, this week's is there. So if you know where it is, the zone and the specific place for that mailbox, then put it down below. Of course, now I've gone Horde, as some of you may know, which means that probably the next few may well be Horde specific ones. I might have to go around some Horde locales. I won't be able to use a character with the Stormwind Guard uniform, though. I'll have to try and work out another sort of uniform to go with. So, on to the first question this week then. So, it says, so again, this is, again, to do with factions. Quite weird now that players used to change realms, races and factions like shirts. Players who can show the commitment to participate in top 100 mythic guilds are Horde in majority. More a case of racials than anything else. I mean, ultimately probably what started it would have been racials. Ironically, I think in Vanilla, I'm trying to remember back now. The problem was Vanilla, although I played and raided in it, I didn't go on a lot of websites and stuff like that. So what was going on community-wise was very much limited to the realms I was on. But I did know. I think the racials were generally more beneficial for the Alliance in raiding then, but at the same time you still had very high level Horde guilds. It was more of a mix. And then, when I came back to the game after that huge break, I don't know whether it had already started or certainly starting around about that time, it was starting to move much more towards Horde guilds, but there were always, Alliance guilds, top Alliance guilds in the mix as well. And it's quite recent that there's been this massive momentum to it. So with the biggest guilds of all being Horde now. And now that, the likes of Midwinter and Scrubbusters, who were the last bastions really, have gone Horde. It's not that there'll be no Alliance guilds in the top 10 necessarily in BFA. There are some that are in the top 10 at the moment that are still, as far as I know, staying Alliance. But yeah, there'll be very few of them. But I think what started out as purely racials, because that's clearly what's caused the thing in the first place, now it's just a momentum that goes there related to the fact that it's a social game. World of Warcraft is a social game. So doesn't it make sense, if you're going to choose to join one faction or other, you haven't got any reason to be one particular one, that you join the one where there's the majority of people, because then there's the greatest chance of being able to recruit just purely from that point of view as a guild, but also it's much more likely that if you get into a game and your friends are playing, it's more likely those friends are Horde, so you get new players coming in, more new players coming in that then end up playing Horde compared to Alliance, and the whole thing just snowballs. And we've got to the point now where I think it's irresistible. You can never really say there's only one way to deal with it, but the only way I can think of to deal with it is just to do what I think MMO should just do in the first place, which is not to have factions for PvE. Factions make sense for PvP, but not for PvE. I keep saying that. But now, and I look at it, and I think that's the only way to really deal with this situation. Or, at the very least, but this wouldn't reverse it, not to have factions along racial lines. It's like, you want to play this race, you play that race. Which do you want to be, Horde or Alliance? Much like it is for Pandaren. But that wouldn't correct the situation. That wouldn't reverse it. That might have prevented it at one time, some years ago, but it wouldn't now reverse the process. So a little bit buggered now. A little bit buggered. On to the next one. So the mailbox, nice to have. So we're talking about, not this mailbox, so in the Warcraft props one, what I showed is the item that I would most have wanted. It wasn't the flashiest, it wasn't the most expensive, although it did go for quite a bit, was a mailbox. There was an actual Alliance mailbox, a Stormwind mailbox prop, which looks like you could actually put to use as well. It looked like it had, you know, space inside. You could actually use it as some form of storage. That would have been pretty neat. That would have been an interesting filing cabinet, potentially. But it went for quite a lot. I don't think, even if I'd have had, because I said, you know, I might have actually got in on some of those items if I'd have had time to save up. Because you have to remember, the price they went for is not what you'd pay more than that, because there's the auction fees and then postage. You've got to have it delivered to you. So, you know, I don't know how much you have to add on top of that to get there. So I wouldn't be able to go in for anything like that anyway. That was, even at the price it was, if I had to pay nothing extra, that was too much. But, so yeah, I would have quite liked that one. But then on to the next point, it says, I personally would have loved the various skulls they had for the orc camps. I know, a bit grim, but cool nonetheless. And yeah, when I was actually saying in the comment, I've actually got, I have an ornamental, like, Celtic type skull, which you take the top of the skull off. It's just like coins and keys and stuff like that you can keep in it. One thing that actually sometimes surprises me, especially with the news, that the EU are getting, like, the merchandise store again, because, you know, I've tried ordering things off the American merchandise store. In theory, they ship overseas, but whenever I've got to, like, trying to complete it, it's like, no, something's always been wrong. So I've never actually been able to get any of the stuff. But one thing I notice is, if you look at the merchandise that you can get, the non-gaming merchandise, it's all like plushies and stuff like that. And, you know, that's fine. That's serving a particular need. But why wouldn't there be some more, like, I don't know whether macabre is the right word, but some more, like, gothic type pieces, like skull, Draenei skulls, orc skulls, you know, things like that. You know, motifs that would be of that vein. Because, of course, you know, we don't need to go out and spend over the odds on movie props. You know, Games Workshop, behave yourself. Blizzard themselves could have crafted some, you know, some things that people could get, like trinkets, that are of the sort of grimmer version, not the nice Happy Care Bear plushie type things. So maybe they're missing a trick there. I don't know. Next one. Also on the props, would have loved the Lordaeron shield. As a side note, such a shame there won't be a sequel. The movie itself I love, but what I was really looking forward to was seeing Lordaeron on the big screen. I think it could have been more impressive than Stormwind. Such a shame. Well, it is a shame. I think it's a shame. I know those people didn't like the film. I like the film. I'm not quite sure where it would have gone. This is the problem, you see. The thing is, like, there's different storylines as well. People talked about the fact that the film was a different story to the official version. But what's the official version? Because the official version that we know of was not actually the original version. You know, the storyline of Warcraft 1 was very basic. But it's not just that it was very basic. It's not just that it was fleshed out in the novels later on. It was more that it was changed in certain respects as well. I mean, sort of it had to change, because apart from anything else, in Warcraft 1 you could either win as the Alliance or win as the Horde. Well, someone had to win in each of those particular events. So, so we wouldn't necessarily... It's like easy to think that it'd progress onto what we now know about the story that came after it, but because it was so different the first time around, that may not have happened as well. I mean, you'd think it very likely would have gone to Lordaeron. The defeat of the orcs, potentially the internment camps, because obviously they had the humans find the baby thrall at the end of it. That was clearly leading into a sequel there. So some stuff, but I think it would have, given that it had already diverged quite a lot from what we accept as the story of that officially, I don't think it would have come back. I think it would have carried on diverging. But I would have still liked to have seen it, because, you know, some films, you know, when they're based on a book, you don't really like to see too many changes. You understand there has to be some changes, because the pacing in a book is very different to a film, and certain other things that you can convey in a book you can't really easily on a film. So you have to change certain things. But you know whenever this happens, you know, the people who do the screenplays always change more than they have to. You know, it happened in Lord of the Rings, for example, and it was very annoying when it happened. But overall, the overall thing still worked. You know, Harry Potter, similar thing, but less so. I think they're less so, largely because you had the author, you know, involved in the film as well. But with Warcraft, I'm not actually that bothered, to be honest with you, because it's based on a game, and the storyline in the game is always very sparse anyway. You know, whenever everyone talks about the rich storyline of World of Warcraft, what we really mean is the novels that proper authors have written afterwards, you know, and made some sense out of the shambles that has been made from the story writers in the game itself. So I was less concerned with the fact it was very different. The fact is it was still true to the Warcraft universe, so to speak. The characters involved, they behaved as you would expect them to behave, even though they carried out very different actions involved in very different events. And, you know, I'd have had every faith in the next film as well. As long as there was a paladin, Turalyon had better have been in there. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been happy then. But, you know, he probably would have been. Or he may have been. But yes, it is a shame. It's a massive shame, but there it is. Next one, it says, again, related to the film. So I think they need to look at how many more WoW subs they created for releasing this movie to find the money to make the next one. Well, Blizzard don't stump up the money to make the film. They sell the license. There was no real risk on their part other than they wanted to make sure that they were happy with the screenplay. So they kept some editorial control, I believe. But it was it wasn't Blizzard making the film. It says, imagine if they released a movie dealing with the current situation where the movie ended with the burning of the tree and the sacking of Lordaeron. Movie leads to expansion. They tried that, didn't they? They did sort of try it. They made, because this is quite notable now, so they made a big deal of the fact that they were developing Warlords of Draenor and Legion in parallel with each other. Because, you know, they were saying at the time this is the model for developing expansions from then on in. Which I don't know necessarily made a lot of sense, but that's what they said. And then it transpired that what had happened was they chose to do Warlords of Draenor first because it was going to tie in with the movie. You know, harking back to all these old characters that were going to be in the first Warcraft movie. But then, of course, unfortunately, the film was delayed. But by this time, Blizzard were committed to Warlords of Draenor. They couldn't then change that themselves. So it all went awry, and the film ended up coming out more in line with Legion than with Warlords of Draenor. So they, in retrospect, would have wished they'd have done it the other way around. And then what's interesting to note is I don't think they're doing that anymore, the parallel thing. Like, we're not really being told that, for example, Battle for Azeroth and another unnamed expansion have been done in parallel. I think we're just getting the impression that it's back to the old ways. So potentially, I suppose, this parallel development thing was there purely to try and tie in with the movie, and it failed. It wasn't Blizzard's fault, of course. It wasn't necessarily anyone's fault as such, but, you know, that's how it goes sometimes. But I would doubt very much that they gained an awful lot of subs from it, and certainly not enough to fund a film if they wish to fund it themselves. And also, I don't really see that Blizzard gain anything out of funding a film anyway. You know, they're obviously up for, you know, allowing their license to be used to make a film if a good job was going to be done of it, and I thought it was. But at the same time, they don't really gain anything from it. And as I've said before, I still think, even though I don't even know if it's improved with what they've changed, but I still think that the new player experience is shocking. And I think if you get into the game from friends and friends ease you into the game, okay, that can smooth it out a little bit. But I think people, if they play a game, if they watch a film and then get into the game as a result of it, they're going to be very disappointed. But it clearly was all tied together. I mean, the film and the game, they tried to tie into each other. I mean, bear in mind, in the film, you had Dalaran as a floating city. Well, it wasn't at the time. It was firmly rooted on the ground. The reason they did that was clearly not to disorientate people who then went on to play the game. I'm quite sure if Duncan Jones hadn't, you know, wanted to do that anyway, that would have been something that Blizzard would have said, can you just put Dalaran in the sky, please? But, you know. So, yeah, I really don't think Blizzard gained financially out of it as such, other than any cut they took from it. But given that the whole thing made a loss, that may not have been all that worthwhile. I really don't know how the financial deal worked. But, yeah, I don't think Blizzard gained much actual business from it. Maybe a little bit, but not much. On to the next one. So this was obviously partway through a conversation, as you can see here, and it's to do with the storytelling in World of Warcraft, that old chestnut. So someone saying, like, Noble said, Blizzard is great at writing small independent stories. Tying them together into one cohesive lot is where Blizzard falls flat. and harks back to what I've been saying before. And this is the reason, because small independent stories are written by an author potentially. But at Blizzard, I mean, for a start, there's no one who's, well, there's clearly no one in charge of tying everything together and keeping everything cohesive. And part of that is just because they clearly don't care. They do not give a monkey's. The number of times they retcon. In fact, they even acknowledge this themselves with the Warcraft Chronicles. The fact that they said, look, you know, this is now it. This is where it's at. We're etching this in stone because there's not going to be any retcon. This is the official story. We've sorted it. We've thought it all through now. This is what we want. And then, I'm not going to point to anything in Warcraft Chronicles like one that's now been clearly changed. But there are a few things in it that I think a number of people, not just me, are a bit suspicious of with what's happened in Legion. It's like, it's almost like, I'm not entirely sure this is all tying in anymore. So I'm not even convinced that the Warcraft Chronicles is the written in stone version that it is supposed to be. It just remains the one that's most likely considered canon. Someone was asking recently about, you know, which books to read, which I wouldn't be the right person to ask anyway, because I haven't read most of the books. But, you know, the fact is, if you're talking about a novel that was written before Legion, which is almost all of them, then I wouldn't be able to advise any at all, because it'd be quite hard to say. Some books are completely non-canon now. Some of them, some bits are still canon, some bits are not. You can't really read the books anymore, the novels, to get an idea of the Warcraft universe, because it's changed. The official version of events has been changed. And there's no need for it. You know, sometimes, you know, people want to do a particular storyline, which seems at odds with what's gone before. But usually, if with just a few little tweaks, you can make it all fit in nicely. But no one puts any effort into doing that at all. And that can only be, not because they're bad authors, but because Blizzard have no interest in making it all work. They don't care. It's a game. I mean, that ultimately, that's what it is. It is a game. Yes, they make money from the novels and stuff like that as well. But it is a game, and they're only thinking one expansion at a time. As long as the story across an expansion makes enough sense that you can go along with it, then that's fine. If the next expansion comes along and everything gets tipped upside down from the previous expansion, as far as they're concerned, that previous expansion is done. They don't care. They're not bothered. Because the only people playing through it, or the vast majority of people playing through it, are only going to play through it to level from 100 to 110 and then get straight onto the BFA content now. So, yeah, there's no interest in maintaining their own intellectual property, really, in terms of, you know, making it all make sense, which is terribly disappointing. But, you know, that's it. Right, on to the last one for this week. So it was a shorter one. So someone's saying, so I'm complaining because now that we can do character copies, we're now really in the situation we're going, do you know what? What's in beta at the moment? Obviously things have to be fixed and there's tuning of classes to be done. But the content as we've got in there is basically what it is. And obviously one notable exception is the complete lack of a Legion Legendary tab. Or in fact, it could have covered all Legendaries. You know, go into a tab, a bit like an heirloom tab, but for Legendaries, because we've got a silly number of them for Legion. So I was saying that that's what I want, because my bags are clogged with them. And I was saying my bank's pretty full as well. There are items, if I'm honest, that I could get rid of from my bank now that I've been keeping that are for Legion, as soon as Legion's sort of over, which will be the case on the 17th of July. Then, yeah, okay, I can get rid of them then. And I can put my Legends in the bank, but it'll be a full bank again. And someone was saying, what about void storage? Apart from the fact my void storage is pretty full, there are a few spaces left, into which I may well be able to put some of them, certainly. But not all of them. But the other thing about void storage, just in general, is for the Legendaries, okay, it should be okay. I haven't tried putting any in yet, but I'm sure it'll be okay. But there's a lot of items you can't put in void storage. A lot of the items that I keep that clogs up my banks won't actually go in void storage, because apart from anything else, it won't let you put in items that are unique. Well, that's almost all of my items that you can't get anymore. You know, all those sort of things that used to do. Some of them don't even do anything anymore. Some of them still work. You know, I can still summon certain bosses in vanilla content that that you need these things for. Although, you know, and then you can't also put in things that stack up. So, you know, again, some older stuff that you can't get anymore that I've retained because I'm a hoarder, you know. I've not just gone hoarder, I am an actual hoarder. And, you know, and I've kept and I want to keep. And I can't put those in either. So there's so many of these knickknacks that I just can't put in. But the void storage itself, yeah, I don't have enough room to put all my legendaries. I can put some of them in. And I can get rid of all the legendaries from my bags. I could have empty-ish bags when BFA leveling starts. That's not the issue. The issue is when I start to gather pieces that I'm thinking I don't need this now, but I might need it later. Let's just put it in the bank. The bank is very unlikely to have many spaces. I mean, it had a few more spaces as soon as the transmog thing came in, because that was really good for Legion, because I was able to empty out a load of armour. But it soon got filled up again. So yes, anyway, there we go. That's this week's mailbox. There'll be a few, obviously there's a World of Warcraft video come out today. There's going to be another one out tomorrow. And I'm aiming to get another one out next week as well, a more general one. So there might be a few more comments for next week as well. But keep the comments coming in as well on anything as seems necessary. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share with others for further content. And until next time, I'll see you later.